My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Now podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing.
This is The Art of Bombing, and so obviously we talk about bombing. That is the primary topic. I usually have my guests tell me a story or two about a time where they had a really bad show or they felt like they bombed, that kind of thing. And
I got one.
Just kind of talk about that. Yeah,
I've only ever had one bad show.
Only one. That's every comic has said that. Only one bad show.
Yeah.
I actually had a guest one time that tried to tell me they never bombed. And then I'm like, well, why did you want to do this podcast? Like, it makes no sense. And by the end of it, they were like, oh, man, I bomb all the time.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know. It depends what your definition of bombing is, I guess. And, like, I think, like, me and my friends started trying to be, like, positive. Jasmine actually being like, you know what? I'm not going to fucking bomb. I'm just going to go have a good time and I'm going to kill it. And even if they're not as receptive as I wanted to be, I'm not bombing. You know? So
absolutely.
I got out of the bombing mind frame, but I mean, that doesn't mean that I don't still bomb jokes sometimes. Or sets.
No, absolutely. Well, in comedy, I think we all have off nights. Even if it's not like a total bomb, we all have those nights. It just doesn't go as good as we would have liked it to. And it's not always because of the performance and because of what we're doing. You know, there's a lot I found, you know, there's some that can go into it, you know, with the venue and how it's set up and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, and for you do a lot of touring with burlesque, the SuicideGirls Black Heart Burlesque. They're in some big venues and stuff like that. Usually sold out crowds. Have you had any experience kind of awkward to do comedy because of the size of the stage and venue?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely like we play a lot of venues that are meant for music. So a lot of them for sure are not ideal, I guess, but they're still, because it's such big crowds, it's just amazing. So I'm just excited to be able to perform for them. But what's it called? We do so many people do too. Like, I don't know, it's pretty legit.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I just wonder because sometimes when you're performing in an alternate venue that's set up for comedy, it can be weird.
I mean, I've done so many weird venues, like just, you know, doing comedy in LA that like it feels like nothing doing anything on tour with SuicideGirls, because it's like pretty much always going to be better than the shit I've done. Like I've done just, you know, little weird, like not actual theaters that's just like a box of a room that somebody called a theater, or like, you know, there's literally an open mic that's like in the parking lot of like a Food for Less. It's like in our garage. So I've done some weird venues before.
No, absolutely. I've to that's for sure. Now, did you do comedy before you got involved with SuicideGirls, or was it so? Or
I actually did SuicideGirls before I did comedy. I always like secretly kind of wanted to do comedy of some sort, but I definitely never ever I lost my hair thing. I never thought I would do stand-up ever. I'm gonna keep these on.
Yeah.
Just because it's so scary, and it was not something that I thought I would ever be able to do, because it's terrifying. And just
absolutely.
Yeah, I think I just was like, because I make music, so I had started doing music first, and I was like, I'm gonna get so famous that I can host SNL, and I'm gonna be like Justin Timberlake and host SNL a bunch of times. That was like my goal. And then I moved to LA to do music, and then I ended up doing SuicideGirls because I was like, okay, well, this could help my following, you know, and I always wanted to be a SuicideGirl since I was like in high school. I always thought it was so cool. But I wasn't really, I actually took pictures for it when I was like 18, and I wasn't really that comfortable in myself naked. So I ended up not putting those up. But Sorry, I'm trying to get my camera setting right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I ended up not doing it when I was 18. And then I moved to LA when I was 23. And I decided to do it because in the past, everybody'd be like, oh, you're going to ruin your music career if you get naked on the internet. And I'm like, that's bullshit. So I finally came to terms with it when I was like 23. And I found out that their headquarters was like 2 miles from where I was. And I saw something online and I was like, fuck it, I'm going to try. And then they immediately, like, I applied and they immediately hit me up like, oh, we want you to shoot. So I was like, okay, cool. I was like fast tracked. And then I went and shot with them and I became a Suicide Girl. And then I did hair. I've done hair since I was in high school. I got my license in high school. So they ended up hiring me to do the hair for the burlesque tour, which I like saw the burlesque tour auditions and I was like, should I try out? And I was like, no, like I'm not really like a burlesque dancer or whatever. And I did the hair and I like, it seemed like so much fun. All these girls were getting ready to go on tour. So I was like, I want to fucking do that. So I tried out the next year, 2014, got on the tour, did Australia, Canada, US as a dancer. And then I ended up like not doing the tour for a little bit. And just randomly one night I went to visit the Comedy Store to see a show because I saw Joe Rogan like retweeted a show or whatever. And I literally got pulled out of an audience in the main room of the Comedy Store. And that's how I ended up starting stand-up, which is insane.
Oh wow, that's crazy. That's a great story. And then that transitioned into now doing comedy to open the burlesque show. Was that something to them about the potential of doing it, or did they always kind of have some kind of an opening act
They
for
used
their
to
show?
They used to actually have burlesque acts open the show, and then I remember the owner talking about having a comedian, how great he thought it would be, and then there was a time where like me and my friend Nikki would be, we're just the funny people on tour. So people would be like, Lindsey and Nikki, they're the comedians at the tour. They can do it. But like, we're like, no, we're not comedians. Like, yeah, we're funny, but we don't have a stand-up act. But yeah, no. So I think they wanted a comedian to open eventually. And then when I got pulled out of the audience at the Comedy Store, I literally was like trying to not be noticed because I had previously, the last time I went there, and I only had been to like a handful of comedy shows at that time. I had previously heckled Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell at the Comedy Store because I didn't know any better because I was just a dumb drunk bitch. And and I have that problem a lot when I bring Suicide Girls to comedy shows. Like even because now whenever I do a show at the Comedy Store, like roast battle or whatever, I'll bring a bunch of Suicide Girls, and the door guys know, they're like, all right, they like have a talk with them. They're like, all right, you guys got to be quiet during the show. Like, don't interrupt the comedian. Like, you can laugh all you want, but don't talk during the show. Don't be interrupting the comedian. Don't be screaming. And I'm like, it's so embarrassing. But I was like that too, so I get it. I just loved Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell so much. So I was like, I love you. I'm a dumb whore. And then, and then these guys at the Comedy Store, it ended up being like Frank Castillo and Hormos Rashid, who are door guys at the Comedy Store, funny comedians. I'm friends with them now, but they were the people who had to tell me to shut up. So anyway, the second time I went to the Comedy Store, I was not trying to be noticed because I was so embarrassed about what I did the last time. So I was just chilling in the audience, but it was like a weird crowd. And Brian Moses, the host of the roast battle, he was hosting, and he just kept talking to me, doing crowd work. And it became a bit in between every comic. He'd be like, all right, Lindsey, how are we doing? Because he was like, oh, I see we got some Suicide Girls in the crowd. And he knows the owner of Suicide Girls, or the founder of Suicide Girls, Missy Suicide. So he was talking to me. He got to know me like by doing crowd work, you know, found out at the time I had a radio show on Playboy Radio and whatever. So then he called Dom Irera up, you know, do you know who that is? Yep. Dom Irera?
Yeah.
If you don't know.
I was on an episode of...
Of what?
I was just saying I was on an episode of Kill Tony where Dom was one of the judges.
Me too. What year?
It was episode 100. So it was a while ago.
No, I mean, me too, though. Ago. It was in LA?
Yeah, it was in LA. Oh, God. It would have been probably 2016? 14, maybe 2015. maybe even before that. Yeah, it was quite a while ago. I used to live in San Diego too, so like I know Frank before he even moved to LA and became a door guy at the store.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah, he used to live up in the Temecula area.
Right. I've done the Temecula roast battle with Frank before. That's where I met his mom, and now I'm in love with her. She's the best.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I did a Kill Tony episode with Dom Herrera on too, so I wonder if it was the same one. Byron Bowers was there too. Was it that one?
No, it was Joe Rogan and Dom were the guests, and then
nice.
Red Band and obviously Tony. So
yeah, so
it was a while ago.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done it in years either. But anyway, so that night that I got pulled out of the audience, it was a Death Squad show. So it was Tony Hinchcliffe, Red Band, and they had a secret guest, which I assumed was going to be Joe Rogan, but it wasn't. It was Steve-O. So Brian Moses called Dom Herrera up, and Dom did not show up. And Brian Moses was like, oh my God. So he was like, what about you, Lindsey? Do you have any bits? And I was like, no, because I was like, I'm not trying to be the attention whore right now. And he was like, oh, come on. And then I like remembered one funny story that I had that people like asked if I was a comedian when I told it. So I was like, okay, I have one funny story. And I was so happy that he egged me on because that's what got me to start stand up. But yeah, so then Dom Herrera ends up coming out. So he's like, all right, we're going to get back to Lindsey. Dom comes up. Then he's like, all right, who wants to hear Lindsey's story? And then the guys in the crowd are like, ooh, of course, because they were looking at me all night. And then he's like, all right, we're going to bring our secret guest out and then we'll hear Lindsey's story. He's like, everyone give it up for Steve-O. So Steve-O was secret guest. Even Steve-O ended up talking to me on stage, was like, what's your name? Lindsey, we got to hear your story. And I was like, so the first thing I said when I went up there, I was like, I guess I'm not doing too bad for my first time at stand-up. Steve-O just opened for me. But I was like, I guess I'm not doing too good either, since we all know he hasn't actually found success in comedy. Like, I did a little roast of him, and he loved it, and Red Band loved it. And then I told this crazy story about a date I went on, and yeah, I did 6 minutes, which for never doing any comedy, that was pretty good.
Oh, that absolutely is. I think my first time was like a 5-minute spot, but I had planned. I wrote months before I finally actually went on stage and did the open mic. Like,
right,
it was very, very, very scary.
Yeah, it was like a month after that I actually went to an open mic for the first time and like tried to write that story and make it better. And when I went to the open mic, it was 3-minute spots in the belly room of the Comedy Store, and Brian Moses was hosting, and he goes, here's Lindsey. She wants to try stand-up. Let's ruin her dreams. So like nobody laughed. Yeah, it was the worst. And I'm like, okay, I haven't revisited the story since. I was like scarred, even though it is pretty funny and I should try to make it a bit, but I just have been scarred about it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and obviously you're busy when you're touring. I mean, because that's a pretty schedule that they have. You know, it's like every day you're in a different city, so it doesn't leave you a lot of time when you're out on the road for 3-4 months at a time either to do stuff in LA anymore, I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I do stuff in LA whenever I'm in LA, but for the last like 2 years, basically, it's been like on tour for 3 months, off tour for 3 months, on tour for 3 months. We took like a 9-month hiatus at one point, but it's just like, even it goes so quick, all of a sudden you're on the road again and you're just like, holy shit. And it's just, yeah, exhausting, but I do whatever I can when I'm in LA.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's an interesting background and a start to comedy. It's amazing how it like transitioned, you know, from doing the modeling, wanting to do comedy to now doing more comedy with the modeling, the SuicideGirls and stuff like that. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is crazy how it all came together. Oh God, I'm gonna have to plug my phone in. It is crazy how it all came together because the owner of SuicideGirls happens to love comedy, so he ended up being like, "Oh, I think it'd be cool to have you like host the show and do some comedy with it." So I started hosting some, but I wasn't booked on the full tours back in like 2017. Then one of my best friends, Nikki, hurt her foot. So they ended up like needing to replace a dancer. So they flew me out to host. And then there were like 10 shows left after they didn't need me anymore, but they didn't want me to leave. So they were like, oh, we'll just keep Lindsey on to like help out with stuff. And it was like, we were in San Francisco and the crowd was hot. We had a burlesque opener that went up at 8:30. They were done at 8:45. There was like 15 minutes before the girls went up. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I know I'm like a stage hog, but I really want to get up there right now. And these local Suicide Girls were like, do it. And I was like, okay, well, I have to ask. So I asked the owner of Suicide Girls. I was like, hey, Sean, you think I could like go warm the crowd up? And he was like, what? And I was like, like just go warm them up. He was like, oh, you mean do stand up? I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, sure. And so I went and did 10 minutes. And then the next day I was like, hey, Sean, do you think I could like do that again tomorrow or tonight? And he was like, Lindsey, you can open the show whenever you want. And I was like, okay, well, I want to do it for the rest of the tour. And he let me do it for the rest of the tour. And then I was booked to host like a month of the next tour. And then, but like the last month of it, not the first two. And then right before the tour started, he called me and was like, our merch girl quit. Would you be down to do merch and you'll get paid? It's not a lot, but you can open this show with your stand-up. And I was like, if I can do my stand-up, of course, I'm down. I'm doing it. So I ended up doing merch. Then the assistant tour manager fucked her job up. So I ended up taking her job. Then I was assistant tour manager for a few tours. Now I'm tour manager too. So it's crazy.
Jeez. I was like, wow, you're like doing like all the positions.
I know. It's
insane. Did hair, helped with hair,
yeah, I was like,
dance, did comedy, like
dancer.
Have you sang on the tour yet?
I've done a few songs. Never like, I wasn't like, it wasn't like put in there as my act, but they've let me do a song before.
No, that's awesome. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
But that's an awesome as far as getting started in stand up and keeping up with it. But now we're gonna get into the bombing part of it, and I'm gonna let you talk about a time where you felt like you might have bombed.
Well, I definitely bombed the first time. Not the first time I did it when I got pulled out, but the first time I went to an open mic and no one said anything. And then George Perez was like, oh, Kat Von D minus. And everybody laughed at that after I went up because he went up after me. But one time specifically that I could think of bombing the worst is I was like maybe a year into stand up. And I'm good friends with Jay Farrow. So he would actually hook me up and like let me do cool shows whenever I was in New York. So I did a show with all the SNL cast at the time in 2016. It was me, Jay Farrow, Colin Jost, Leslie Jones, and another girl whose name I can't remember. But yeah, so it was like all the SNL people. So it was like a pretty big show. It was like, I don't know, maybe 200 people at the comic strip in New York City. And I was doing 10 minutes. And I think that might've been like the first time I did 10 minutes. So I was like using filler, like using a new story I had never told before. And I was like super nervous about that. So I had been just working on this one story over and over again. And I was like, oh, my other jokes are solid. I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about this like 2-minute story or whatever. So I get past the 2-minute story. My first 5 minutes go great. And then I start getting into my other material and it was like abortion jokes. And I didn't realize I was like in the was it Upper East Side? I think it's the Upper East Side. And it was just all like really hoity-toity white people. And they did not, definitely Republicans, they did not like my abortion jokes. It was just like the energy was like sucked out of the room like a vacuum. It was crazy. And there was only like maybe 2 girls. I had a table of friends who were still laughing, but they were like off to the side and like you could barely hear them. So I basically had one girl who was dying laughing in the front. So I just focused on her because I was like, okay, at least I got this girl. But literally everyone else was like totally blank face pissed off. It was crazy. And it was like, obviously I wanted to do good because I'm trying to like impress the people around me. And Jake got me on the show. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to, do badly. But it was cool. He was nice about it. He was like, oh, you got great stage presence. Colin Jost gave me a tag. That was pretty cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. It's good that when comics are supportive. Times when you bomb so bad, comics are like, I don't want to touch you.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want that bomb rubbing off on me.
Right. I mean, that's rude, but yeah. I mean, it sucks. I mean, and then I've just been at open mics where you're literally talking to no one.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. or no one's paying attention to you because they're all just looking at their phone about their material. And I'm like, I've had so many times where I freaked out, not like freaked out, but just fucking yelled at the audience, like at an open mic. I'd be like, you guys have to get up here too, you fucking assholes. Like, show some fucking respect. Even if you don't think I'm funny, at least pay attention, you fucking pieces of shit. And I know I'm funny. God damn
it. That's great. I've seen some comics do that too, like get angry. Yeah, it's kind of entertaining. I try to watch as much as I can, but you know,
it's hard.
I get it. Like, there's only so much open mic you could watch. You know,
it makes you go crazy. Yeah, like it makes me drink. It makes me drink a lot, and I'm not even like a big drinker normally, but I had a time period where I was probably drinking way too much, and then all of a sudden you're like, now we're getting a bag of cocaine, and it's just like on and on and. Open mics were not the healthiest time for me.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great. So when you do, like, when you have a bad show, what are things that you do to try to like takeaways from like a bad set or a set that you didn't feel like went very well? What are some things you try to take away to improve on?
I mean, if I have a bad, like I've relied too much on my like I can't talk. I've relied too much on not an open mic, too much on how my set goes to make me happy, which is not a healthy mind frame. Like, you got to just be ready for whatever's going to happen, because if you're sitting there like, oh, I need to do well or I'm going to be depressed, it's not a healthy mind frame, because you're not always going to do great. You know what I mean? Like you said, there's so many factors. It's like who went up before you. And obviously, like, you know, you should be able to follow anyone, but just, it could be like a whole dull show and then you go up and the audience is already checked out. Or it could be like, you know, they're just tired, or it's late at night, or, you know, you never know what the situation is. So, to deal with it, I've definitely gone to my vices, like I said before, which was unhealthy. But I also, so that's not the way to do it. But also, I would just try to take away, like, okay, well, I just need to work on this joke more and rewrite, which I hate rewriting, but it's definitely a necessity, because you can always make a joke better. And that's what I love about being on tour, is that I'm doing it 6 nights a week, every night. So every day it would just naturally form a little bit better. And I would end up, you know, tweaking it just a little bit. And then I'm doing that for 3 months straight, 69 shows in a row. So it's like, you know, so much better than sitting. Yeah. Going to open mics is like, you can get really, really depressed. Like sometimes, and then there's people like Frank Castillo who will be like, you got to go to 5 open mics a night. And I'm like, okay. And I did that for a while. I did, but you know, the whole like grind and do as many as you can. But I think everybody's different. And for me, it was just mentally not healthy to do that. Like I couldn't just take all the disappointment.
Yeah, I totally get that. I also think it depends on kind of the path you end up do. I mean, for some people, like with you, now that you're working with the Blackheart Burlesque and you get to go on tour with them and open for them, you're, like you said, you're doing this week. You don't need to necessarily go do open mics because you're getting plenty of stage time. You're doing 15, 20 minutes ish.
I started with 10 minutes, like I said, but now I do a half hour. So that's amazing.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So you're doing a half hour, 6 nights a week. That's way more.
That's,
and it's
3 hours a week. It's way more than these people. Yeah. Like the people that are going to 10 mics a night are still only getting like, 3-minute spots. So it's like, it kind of evens out.
Exactly.
But
because that's how I feel too. Like I work the road quite a bit as a feature, and so I don't go to as many open mics during the week. Hit 1 or 2 depending on what's going on or whatever.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like I don't need to be at every open mic because I'm getting quality stage time.
Exactly.
And longer stage time.
And you feel better about yourself when you do it, when you do good stage time. Like you don't want to go to an open mic and feel like shit. Like it just sucks. But I mean, if I'm not getting booked, then of course I go to open mics. I go to them in between tours. And then I even go to open mics on tour sometimes. Do you know Dave Temple?
I do not. I haven't heard of that name.
Okay. Well, he's a New York comedian, and I just did the Real Ass podcast with him. That's Luis Gomez's podcast from Legion of Skanks. And
okay, I've heard of Luis Gomez, but
Yeah, so I did me and Dave Temple were on Real Ass Podcast together, and then Dave was like, I know you. I know where I know you from. He was like, I saw you go up at an open mic in Memphis. And I was like, oh my God, poor and hungry. Because like if there's a stage to get on, I'm gonna get on it. Like it's like I may not go out of my way to go on to an open mic on tour, but everybody went to this bar after the show, and the girls were texting me, and I was on the bus like ready to go to sleep, and they were like, "There's comedy here, Lindsey. You gotta come do it." And I was like, "Okay." So I was like, "Tell them I want to come do a spot, and I'll come over." And they let me do a spot. Turns out I the host knew somebody I knew from LA. You know how comedy is; everybody knows somebody. And then what's it called? I did a spot and it was really awesome. So then every time we've gone to Memphis now, because it's right across the street from our venue, I always go there and do a spot. And Dave Temple just happened to be there in Memphis as well and saw me go up, and it was really cool because he was vouching for me on the Real Ass Podcast. He was like, she's a real comic. You know she's a real comic because she went from doing a theater across the street and came to this shitty ass open mic where people are smoking cigarettes inside and did a spot and fucking killed it. And it was awesome.
That's great. Yeah, that's definitely a sign of a true comic. Willing to go do a crappy open mic after a theater show.
Willing to torture yourself for the art.
Right. The good set. I had a good time. We can't be having this. I need to go to bed sad.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm trying to think of like any other times that I bombed so hard that like I felt it hard, and it's like they're all a blur.
Yeah, sometimes that's for the best. That's one thing that the longer I've done comedy, I look at things like when the first couple years in, like if I bombed at an open mic, I would like, I really hard at an open mic, took it really personal. And now I'm like, open mics have an objective. Like there's a purpose. I'm trying out new material, or I'm trying to rework it, or whatever it is. And if I don't do good, it doesn't matter because I'm trying to get that. So, whatever the joke is, I'm trying to get it worked out so it's good and that kind of thing. So like,
right.
For me, I don't look at, like bombing at an open mic. I don't consider it bombing. I consider it part of my writing process, really.
Yeah, and that's true. But I think that for me, I actually get more nervous going to open mics than going to doing like a big theater show, because at the theater, I know like I'm going to at least get some of these people. Like some of these people are going to think I'm funny. But when you're in front of your peers and it's other comics, that to me is what's so nerve wracking, because I care what they think more about the other people. Like I want the comics to think I'm funny. So that's stressful to me.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Totally agree with that. I see that. I even feel that sometimes too at open mics. It's like, I don't consider it bombing, but then like I said, if I do bad and there's a bunch of comics, I do kind of like, shit, they're going to think I'm unfunny or whatever.
Right. That's how I feel. And it's like, I shouldn't care what they think, but you can't help it sometimes. But I actually... Yeah, I judged. And by the way, I just want to say this just in case, because I did not realize that my phone was dying. It shouldn't be. But if my phone dies, I apologize. And that's what happens. Oh, okay. Like if I just sign off at some point. But we're 33 minutes in, so we're doing pretty good. But no. So I judged Comedy Fight Club at the Stand in New York City recently. And this guy comes up to me after the show, and I had a great set. I did an opening set. I opened the show, and then I judged, and I was like killing it. I felt really good about it. And this guy comes up to me and negs me after and is like, "Oh, you bombed, but I thought you were funny." And I was like, first of all, that's not a compliment. Second of all, fuck you, I didn't bomb. But I didn't even kind of say that. This other girl came up and was like, "She did not bomb," and fucking flipped out on him. So I was like, oh, thank God for this bitch.
Oh, that's funny. Is possibly gonna die. I'll get kind of finished up here, that way we get the whole recording. As far as I've coined it the feeling that you have when you do bad. How long does that feeling typically last for you after a set?
A couple of years. No.
I still have some that haunt me. Yeah,
I'm like, does it ever really go away? I don't know. It just depends on the day, and it depends where I'm at mentally at that time period. Like, there are times where I bomb and I'm like, whatever, fuck these people. And then there are times where it's just absolutely devastating and I go home and cry or try to like find a booty call to make me feel better.
That's a good way to do it.
It's really day to day, yeah. Luckily, though, when I'm on tour with Suicide Girls, those fans love me. They're totally my people. Like, really been good for me, where I don't feel like I've bombed a single set. Because I usually, and also I have a half hour, so I can win them back. Of course, I've bombed a set on tour ever, I don't think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, normal to have maybe one. But like you said, when you're doing 30 minutes in a show or whatever, you have time to win the audience back, so that's quick.
And that's what's so frustrating about trying to do. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I saw you do, seen you live when you guys were in Minneapolis, and you did fantastic at that
Thank you.
show. Yeah, anyway, what were you going to say?
Wait, Minneapolis, what was the venue?
It was like
the women's
building.
Yes, was it Halloween?
No. Halloween, I think. I think Halloween. I think it was like right after Halloween.
Yeah, because we dressed up. I remember I was dressed as Tech 9 one time there, and then I was dressed. I forget what I wore the next time.
Yeah, I think it was like the November 2nd. It was like right after Halloween.
Yeah, I don't remember what I was going to say before that, to be honest. So.
Oh. It happens. A fun question that I like to ask my guests is, what's the worst thing you've ever said to somebody from stage, like on stage?
I mean, the most terrible things I've ever said were definitely in roast battles. I obviously said some really fucked up shit to people during roast battle. But as far as like a heckler, you mean, right?
Yeah, like an audience member.
I mostly just insult their dick size because that always works, Because hecklers are, I'm like, big. I always will be like, oh, big dick guys don't have to heckle, like. If you had, if you were confident about your dick size, you wouldn't be heckling me right now. But otherwise, what else have I said? I mean, I've been a little too mean, like maybe too mean and not funny enough, because I think a lot of times everybody's trying to have fun. And like I said, I have heckled before I realized I was an idiot. And so a lot of girls are in the audience just like wanting to have fun. They're screaming during your set and they're enjoying you, but they don't realize that they're interrupting your flow. So I've had to be like, I love you, strippers, but like, shut the fuck up, And it doesn't always, like, sometimes people think it's funny. And then sometimes you could tell that the audience is like, oh, she was kind of mean just then,
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I suppose too, with performing like just before a burlesque show, the people a lot of times, because burlesque is different in the sense that the crowd really gets into it. It's not like going to a strip club, and it's not like just going to like a regular show. Like the crowd really, the energy really feeds off burlesque and stuff, and people want to scream and hoot and holler, which are all appropriate things to do during burlesque. But on the comedy portion, I'm sure they're ready to do that right away, which I'm sure is kind of annoying.
Right. And then we have a VIP hour that happens like 2 hours before the show. So then they're like drinking for an hour in between that. So like by the time we go up, they're just fucking hammered. So it can be hard to control them,
Yep. They're already.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get how that goes. Well, and I like to, because I talk a lot about the bad stuff in comedy and everything. I like to try to end on a positive note, and I always ask my guests, what is something, and it can be whether in your personal life, professional life, or whatever, what do you feel, what are you the most proud of? What's your proudest achievement thus far in life?
In life or in comedy?
And whichever you prefer.
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I guess like I might have to say just the fact that I've completed so many tours without losing my mind. I'm pretty proud of that, and the fact that I just keep climbing the job ladder and taking everybody's job. But there goes my phone. Oh well, okay.
Oh shit!
That was karma for talking shit. No, yeah, I think just being able to get through these tours, living on a bus with 10 girls is really hard, and I feel very proud that I've been able to do a national tour, and I've done some international tours with them, and that I'm now doing a half hour of comedy. That was a huge goal for me, and it, took a few years. I've been doing comedy for like 4 years, but I finally got a half hour this fall, and that was huge for me. So I'm definitely really proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose traveling like that when you're on a bus, there's definitely probably bad days. Like,
oh my God.
I feel like it doesn't matter how many, being cramped in such a small space with so many people, it can definitely have bad days.
It's such an awesome life, and it's so amazing, but it's like, it's hard to live with that many people, especially when people are not clean. But I was like the bus Nazi, so I made sure everybody was clean. But it's hard when people don't listen to you, and then it's just like hard when the fans are really excited, and they're they've been waiting for this, and it's our one time we're coming to their city that year, but for us it's just another day of doing the same thing. So it's like we're not as excited as the fans are always, because we're just so exhausted. Like, of course we're so grateful to be there and everything, but it can be hard to try to keep that excitement level up and match the fans, you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Where can people find you?
I am on
social
Instagram.
Media.
What was that?
Oh, I just said wherever you want people to follow you.
Okay, yeah, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at Lindsey Jennings with a Z at the end. And then you can go to allmylinks.com/Lindsey Jennings with a Z, and you can find all my links on there. I've got my OnlyFans, my Patreon, my Amazon wish list. Buy me something, sign up for my subscriptions, get it all.
All right, there we go. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. No problem.
The Art of Bombing is a Blitzed Entertainment production. Hosted and produced by Dan Bublitz Jr., The Art of Bombing intro music was written and performed by John Holt. All other music used in this podcast was under the Creative Commons license. If you would like to help The Art of Bombing, you can do so by subscribing, rating, and reviewing our show on whatever podcast application you use to listen to The Art of Bombing. For previous episodes, blogs, and more, visit artofbombingpod.com. Have a great week, and remember, stay safe so you can live to love.